guarantees of origin. For those of you who have followed us, who've been following us already for a few weeks, the Florence School of Regulation started looking into the topic of guarantees of origin in the context of a cooperation agreement with the European Commission's DG Energy. The topic, the main focus of this research project that we are developing is how to enhance, how to upgrade guarantees of origin in order to make them become an instrument useful to achieve the renewable energy penetration target that we know is one of the main targets that the European Union is pursuing in the more wider climate targets. So we had a first online debate on October 6th regarding this. We started from a more general reasoning around how to achieve, how to reach this renewable energy consumption target in a very efficient way, in a cost-effective way. And we came up with a proposal that we explained during the previous online debate, but that we will repeat today, so do not worry. We will just recap a little bit what was said at the previous webinar. And then we tried to see whether guarantees of origin could be the right instrument to achieve this purpose. Again, we took into account renewable energy as a whole, so we did not distinguish between renewable electricity and renewable gas. On the contrary, we tried to actually link these two energy vectors in a sector coupled or a sector integrated perspective. But of course, we left with many question marks on how to really make it become a concrete proposal. What are the features that guarantees of origin should include in order to become such useful instrument? So that's where we left, and that's where we will restart today. Today, the scope of today's webinar is really to go more in depth into the discussion and discuss many features that these guarantees of origin should have. First of all, we should discuss to what extent guarantees of origin could remain similar to what they are today in scope, in use, and to what extent instead they would need to take into account other elements and therefore become really an upgraded instrument. So we will do so with the help of our speakers today. We will start with, as I said, with explaining in more details our proposal, our FSR proposal. Alberto Ticht will guide us through the FSR proposal. Actually, we foresaw 15 minutes for Alberto's presentation. Then we will hear comments from our distinguished panel of speakers. We will have Jeppe Björk. He is a lead development manager at Energinet, but he will speak today on behalf of GIE. He will update us also with insights from his work in the Prime Movers Group, very importantly, looking at this topic of guarantees of origin together with other associations and bodies. Then we will have Katrin Verpimp from the Association of Issuing Bodies, sorry. And Katrin, she coordinates the gas scheme group, and she's also head of quality assurance. Then we will have Mr. Rolf Ticht of ERGAR, which is the European Renewables Gas Registry. He's board member of ERGAR and also Verto Gas managing director. And we will conclude with Michele Bernatore in his role of former president of the European Energy Retailers Association. Of course, your questions will be very much welcome. So I invite you to start writing questions in the box, and then we will dedicate the second half of the webinar today to Q&A session. This said, I wish you good work, and I give the floor to Alberto.
Thank you, Laria. Good morning from my side as well. Thank you for joining us. What I will do in the next 15 minutes is to look at our proposal, present our proposals, not just the general idea, but also, as Ilaria was saying, some defining feature of this proposal. So let me start immediately by some background. I think we're all familiar with the way in which, now let me assume that I can move this. Sorry, just one sec. Doesn't seem to be moving. Oh yes, it's moving very slowly. Okay, well, it's moving somehow. Yeah, okay. So we start with the background. I think we're all familiar with this background. The background is of increasing ambition of the European Union towards the decarbonization target, and with this also an increased ambition in terms of renewable shares in final energy consumption. Now, if we have a more ambitious target, costs are likely to increase. And therefore, it becomes imperative that we identify the least cost solution for achieving this target as a matter of policy, or at least as a reference for policymakers. So policymakers may want to use this as their target in trying to achieve the renewable penetration goal at least cost, or at least it could be useful to have it as a reference so that if they decide to deviate from that for whatever policy objectives they have, then they would know, how much more expensive such a deviation might become. So here we're not talking about how much renewable hydrogen, renewable electricity, or biogas, renewable gas there should be. This is a fascinating debate, and there are a lot of estimates around, discussions as to what is the right shares. Well, we leave that aside for the moment, and what we're trying to find, or what we're trying to identify, is a mechanism that would tell us which is the least cost combination of the renewable energies of the different types, the different renewable vectors, that would deliver the overall target at least cost. And just the only bit of theory that we put into this presentation is that this optimal combination, this least cost combination, is the one where the marginal cost of greening the different vectors is equalized across the different vectors themselves. So what do we mean by greening? We're not trying to paint clearly an energy vector one color. By greening, we mean replacing a vector of a conventional vector with its equivalent, its renewable equivalent. So replacing electricity from conventional sources with renewable electricity, replacing decarbonized hydrogen with renewable hydrogen, and decarbonized gas with renewable gas. That's what we mean by greening. So it's just a nickname to avoid all the time saying replacing a conventional vector, conventional but decarbonized vector with its renewable. Now, the cost of greening is likely to increase as you try to have a greater penetration of renewable in each vector. And the optimal point is the one in which the marginal cost of greening the different vectors is equalized across the vectors, as I mentioned. Now, then this is just a bit of theoretical introduction. I think is pretty obvious. And then we looked at what is available at the moment, and we found that, okay, in electricity, there is quite some experience with support schemes. There were feed-in tariff being replaced by feed-in premia. We have, in some jurisdictions, green certificates. We also have investment grants. But all of this is mostly for electricity. There is very little for gas. There are only a few schemes, notably in France, in Italy, in Denmark. So while our initial focus was on trying to propose something for gas, we said, why don't we try to propose something that could be could take a more holistic approach? Because, as I mentioned, the cost might be higher, and therefore the benefits of trying to achieve the target at least cost could be greater. So that's where we tried to go. And then the question is whether we could enhance guarantees of origin to in supporting the achievement of the renewable energy penetration target at least cost by promoting the equalization of the marginal cost of greening the different vectors. So this is what we set out to do. Now, our mechanism is based obviously on guarantees of origin. In fact, on a subset of them, I'll come to that in a moment, which we'll refer to as guarantees of renewable origin. It will supplement, this is not a typo, there may be other typos in the presentation, but here we wanted to use this this term to indicate that what we have in mind is something that becomes the basic support scheme, the basic reference for supporting renewable energy. So other scheme may come on top. So this will be slipping below the existing scheme. We believe it is fully consistent with the approach in the governance regulation. It can also work alongside statistical transfer and renewable funding mechanisms. Now, both statistical transfers and renewable funding mechanism provide some flexibility in the way in which the member states can contribute to the collective target. And our proposal is also a mechanism to introduce some flexibility on the side of the market, not on the side of member states, but on the side of the market, to achieve the target with the optimal combination of vectors, renewable vectors, and therefore also at least cost. If wanted, this mechanism could also be the basic tool, the main tool for accounting the development of renewables toward the achievement of the targets. So it can work in different ways. So I mentioned it's consistent with the governance regulation. It would require change in the 2018 renewable regulation directive, because that directive limit the scope of the guarantee of origin to disclosure purposes. A very important one, to let consumers know what they are consuming. But obviously, if we want to use the guarantees of origin for other purposes, that limitation needs to be removed. And in fact, we can see three possible uses for guarantees of origin: the disclosure purposes, as I mentioned, but also they could become an instrument for indicating the life cycle carbon footprint for the energy vectors. We're not looking into this. This is has more to do with implementation or the enhancement of the ETS, the emission trading schemes. But what we are focusing today is their role in guaranteeing the renewable origin and measuring the renewable value of the vectors against which they are issued. So what we're looking at is a subset. What we're focusing on is a subset of guarantees of origin, those which have been issued, will be issued against renewable energies. However, they are defined in legislation. We're not here aiming at going to the taxonomy of renewable energies. This subset, for simplicity, we'll call it guarantees of renewable energy, so GROWs. The GOs and GROWs could have exactly the same format, except one aspect that GROWs would say, but this energy is also renewable. So in the old days, one could have said that GROWs are GOs printed on green paper. Now we don't print anything anymore, but basically that's the difference. If there will be exactly the same information, except that we'll have another flag saying this energy is renewable according to legislation. GROWs could clearly still be used for disclosure purposes and for whichever purposes they could usefully have in the implementation of the ETS. So this is the idea, the general idea. Let me now go into some defining features of the scheme, because as we always know, the devil is in the detail. First of all, how the scheme would work. I think we start from the point that, or from the concept that the obligation, the target actually, the renewable penetration target is expressed in terms of final energy consumption. So why don't we look at final energy consumption as a starting point for our scheme? And the idea is that we call it grow obligation. I'll come to in a moment what that means. Will be imposed on final consumers, or if they're served by a supplier retailer, then the supplier retailer, especially from small consumer, would be the supplier retailer being subject to the obligation. But large consumer buying directly on the market would probably have the obligation imposed on themselves. What this obligation would be about would be they will have to procure and surrender for cancellation an amount of gross which is equal to a share of, or represent a renewable energy equal to a share of their final energy consumption, a predefined share. For example, if we take by 2030, there may be an overall target of 40% of final energy consumption be covered by renewable energy. Policymakers decide that this effort should be shared equally by all consumers, then every large consumers or suppliers or retailers would have to procure and then surrender an amount of gross which represent energy equal to 40% of the final energy consumption for which they are responsible. This is actually in continuity to the use of guarantees of origin by retailers for disclosure purposes. So here we're not introducing a new mechanism. We're just introducing a new role for an instrument that retailers and suppliers may be quite familiar with. Obviously, they or even final consumers may decide to procure more gross and surrender more gross. Here, I think, for example, at local renewable energy communities where one consumer may want to support renewable production in the local area and therefore may want to buy more gross from local renewable producers than would be required by the obligations. So this grows, like the GOs, could have multiple roles. The system is very simple. GOs and GOs are issued, they are traded, transferred, and then they are surrendered for cancellation to demonstrate the fulfillment of the target. They can also be withdrawn if issued incorrectly, or if they're not surrendered or used, then they will expire, and so they will be cancelled. So it's nothing different from what most of the mechanism based on tradable certificates already have. Now, one detailed question, one aspect which will have to be carefully looked into, and it's not an aspect specific for the mechanism we're proposing, it's more specific for the way in which the achievement of the renewable penetration target would be monitored, is where and how you measure the production or consumption of renewable sources. So here I refer to Article 7.1 of the 2018 Renewable Directive. If you read it, it seems that the three segments, the electricity, heating and cooling, and transport, are added one-to-one. There is some normalization in the annexes, but the idea is that 1 megawatt hour of electricity, 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy, heating and cooling would be counted equally. Now, this does not need to be the same. We do not go into this aspect. Another aspect is at which point of the energy chain you will measure the energy, the renewable energy. I'll come to that in a moment. But we do not go into this one. This is an issue that will have to be solved anyway and addressed anyway in implementing the target, the overall target. So, and the mechanism is flexible enough that can adjust to whichever solution or whichever answers to these questions. For example, here we see in this part, we see the use of electricity with and without hydrogen. Now, clearly, there are different stages in this process, and you can measure consumption at any stage on any vector. Again, this will have to be decided not just for in relation to the mechanism that we propose, but more generally on how you measure renewable energy consumption to see whether you have achieved the target. So, the point that I would like to make here is that our mechanism is flexible enough and can adapt to any answer to these questions. Another question is what is the geographical footprint of these mechanisms? You could have a single mechanism covering a single scheme covering the whole of the European Union, or even the European Union plus the EEA countries. And then here the issue is whether you want to have physical proximity, or whether you want to have national schemes which may be mandatory or voluntary, and then you have the issue of whether there can be trading between the different schemes. Now, this is still obviously the wider the geographical footprint, the greater flexibility you provide in meeting the target, and the lower the cost. That I think goes without saying. So a wider geographical footprint, it may reduce the physical link between the consumption and the final consumption and the renewable production, but that also going across vector may weaken this a bit. And in any case, as I said, there are already around mechanisms for flexibility, like the statistical transfers, which indicate that there may be a bit of flexibility. I mean, a bit of flexibility could be accepted in implementing this scheme. So now, and here then we go back to to what how the targets are expressed. They're expressed as collective target with a contribution by the different member states. So I think there are two important dimensions here that we policymakers will have to decide if they were to adopt a scheme like this, a mechanism like this, is whether you would allow trading across member states or trading across vectors. So could somebody subject to obligation in, let's say, France, could procure agro from Germany, which means representing renewable energy production in another member state? And again, can somebody consuming hydrogen could fulfill its obligation by buying agro issued with respect to renewable electricity? The target is actually in terms of final energy consumption. As I said, Article 7.1 of the 2018 directive seems to add them up in one-to-one. So one could say that this might be possible, but obviously, policymakers will have to decide how much flexibility, and the more flexibility you give, the lower would be the cost would be of meeting the target. So in terms now of governance and issuing, Ilaria has already mentioned that there are a number of issuing bodies. There is the AIB, the Association of Issuing Bodies, but there is also issuing bodies outside the EIB, ERGAR and Certify. So the question, if you try to have a more statutory system for the support of the implementation of the renewable target, is whether we need a single statutory network of issuing bodies, and whether there should be common accreditation procedure for the issuing bodies. Here we're going into the governance detail. In terms of format, I mentioned already, the GROs will not be that different from the GOs, except that we'll have to have another record, another field, another flag, which is saying this energy is certified as renewable. Whatever I mentioned already, whatever will be the definition of renewables in legislation. Finally, always on the governance side is whether we should have a system of different network of issuing body with mutual recognition and common rules, or whether we should try to have convergence towards a single scheme, a single network of issuing body, and then there will be clearly single rules applying to all of them. For sure, if this mechanism were to become statutory, we need to have a single register of guarantee of renewable origin, because that would allow the interoperability and the trading of GROs to the extent that would be allowed by the way in which the scheme is implemented. Well, that was all I wanted to present. Thanks a lot for your attention. And then I give the screen back to Ilaria, and I stop sharing my slides.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alberto, for explaining the proposal very clearly, I think. Without any further delay, I would just start with our panel discussion. I would ask the speakers to try to stick to the speaking time which we envisage, which is 5 minutes. And then, as I said, we will open more the floor to discussion with the rest of the participants. But I'm really looking forward to your feedback, and we can start from Jeppe. You are muted.
Thank you very much, Elia. Can you hear me and see me now? Perfect. So, yes, my name is Jeppe Bjerg, and apart from representing GRE here today, I work at Energinet, and we are, apart from being TSO on electricity and gas, we are also issuing body of guarantees of origin for electricity and gas in Denmark, and as such member of AIB and ERGAR. So I've had the pleasure of working and co-chairing the Geo Prime Movers group within the last couple of years, and contributing to the dialogue on geos in the Madrid forum. As you are aware, GRE represents 70 members across Europe who is operating infrastructures, so transmission system, underground storage, and LNG facilities. And our members today already accommodate growing shares of both renewable and low carbon gases in our infrastructure. As GIE, we definitely see a role for both renewable but also for low carbon gases in a cost-effective transition of the European energy system. And we see a role for our infrastructure in really establishing a European market for this, connecting sources and sinks at a European scale. Therefore, we are also very much supporting development of a true European market for this, which would need harmonized regulation, of course. Coming to the GEO, we see that the GEO could play an enabling role in creating such a market, but we also see that several measures need to be taken before this could happen. And this does include not only that we have a common standard for GEOs, but also some type of revision of the purpose and function of the GEO under the Renewable Energy Directive compared to what it is today. So we work in GRE with other industry associations within the Geo Prime Movers group. And as I said, we have reported to Madrid Forum 3 times now on the industry perspective on this. And my statement here will be based on these recommendations. We have 4 recommendations that we presented to the Madrid Forum at the last Madrid Forum. And they all support that we see an enhanced role of GEOs. But compared to what you proposed today here on having one only on renewable, we also have some recommendations. We also see a role for low carbon gases in the next years to reach scale. And that is also reflected in our recommendations. So the first recommendation that we have is that we see a strong need for a clear terminology on renewable and low carbon gases. We think this is less of a challenge for renewable because we have the Renewable Energy Directive as a basis, and we have the CEN standardization work, which is in process, which will develop that as we see it. But we see a need for terminology that also includes low carbon gases. And if we are talking about cross-vector guarantees of origin, so linking electricity with hydrogen, for instance, this terminology is something that definitely needs to be in place to establish a system around GEOs where you could basically enable such a market, such an instrument as you are proposing here today. Our second recommendation goes that we as it is now mandatory to issue guarantees of origin for renewable energy sources, we also recommend that it should be mandatory to issue guarantees of origin for low carbon energy gases, or low carbon energy gases which truly demonstrate that greenhouse gas emission savings are taking place. Again, this is coming from the gas sector. We see a role for this next to renewable gases in the short to medium frame, and therefore a geo market should also include those gases. Our third recommendation is that that today there are several ways of trading, you would say, several mechanisms, instruments for trading renewable gases in our infrastructures. And we really believe that one instrument for trading is to be developed, and we think that building a system around GEOs is something that we recommend. We recommend that the future certification system should build around GEOs. We see the standardization work being a good start, but it has to also somehow be linked with other ways of trading renewable gases, like the voluntary schemes that we have today for use of renewable gases in the transport sector. And our fourth recommendation is very much along the line that the FSR proposal that we need somehow to link this with sustainability information. Yeah. So I have 1 minute left. Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. As we saw at the Madrid Forum, this is also questions that the European Commission examine at the moment. The cross-vector and cross-country concept that FSR is proposing here has many of the same ambitions and aims that we are proposing. But there are also some issues that need to be addressed. The scope and function of the guarantees of origin would need to be amended in the directive. The way that member states count targets would also need to be amended. Renewable gases, just as an example, is today counted as being used where in the countries where they are injected today. And I think these definitions need to be amended as well to have a trustworthy market and system. There are also issues on how to ensure additionality. The instruments in the Renewable Energy Directive is basically to increase the use of renewable energy. So such a system and how that would ensure that additional capacity of renewable energy is actually being built is very important. And of course, there are some issues around subsidies and double subsidies, which I think needs to be discussed. But we very much welcome the contribution from FSR, and we look forward to discuss this with you and the participants today. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to you, Jeppe. And yes, indeed, we will go deeper into discussion on subsidies later on. Yeah. There are also some polls. Catherine, your turn, please.
Hello, you hear me well? Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Catherine Verwimp. I work for the Association of Issuing Bodies, actually already a long time on the new development areas. And especially this year, there's a lot of new development. So I will say something about three aspects. Who is the AIB? Secondly, what is EECS, what is the European Energy Certificate System? And thirdly, I will share some experiences from our members with quota obligation certificates. So who is the AIB? It's a non-profit association of issuing bodies. It was founded in 2002. It has as its mission guaranteeing the origin of European energy since already quite some years. We have today 29 members, all issuing bodies, and some observers and applicants ongoing, where membership application is ongoing. Currently, all of our 29 designated issuing bodies are assigned by their governments to issue guarantees of origin for electricity. And 5 of them are today assigned to issue also gas guarantees of origin. Several more are likely to become appointed for gas, but also several are likely not to be appointed for gas. So there may be in some countries different organizations appointed today for the different energy carriers. Some of our members operate also a support system, and some also supervise electricity disclosure obligation for suppliers. Our members are a variety of all types of organizations. Some are regulators, some are TSOs, we have energy agencies or environmental agencies, we have market operators, but all of them have the role to issue guarantees of origin and to manage efficiently and reliably a guarantee of origin system. Our observers, so we have also an observer who is certified, aims to set up an issuing body as well, and is not yet involved in governmental designation. So also historically, we have had members who are not governmentally appointed and operating simply a voluntary certification system. So that's definitely also included in EECS. AIB developed EECS, the EECS standard, and it operates a hub for international transfer of guarantees of origin. So last year, in 2019, we facilitated cross-border transfer of 600 million guarantees of origin in a reliable way. We find reliability and quality key. We do audits amongst our members every 3 years, technical audits and system rule audits. And we have also systems in place for preventing financial fraud. We recently revised our governance structure for joint decision-making and continuous development with democratic consensus. We developed a new delegation matrix and we enabled independent decision-making for electricity issuing bodies and gas issuing bodies on energy carrier-specific topics. Then EECS is a jointly developed standard by these issuing bodies, and it's actually an umbrella certificate system. It has a general set of rules for all types of certificates that fall under the EECS quality. It's a voluntary standard, basically, and it has, at the end of the document, scheme-specific rules per energy carrier or per type of certificate. So we have an electricity scheme, and we added last year a gas scheme. And within a scheme, you can also have different products. Apart from that, a scheme can be linked, or a certificate can be linked with an independent criteria scheme, which sets its criteria outside of EECS. An EECS certificate, basically, as Ilaria already showed, is an identification number with a number of data fields. And one of the data fields is an energy carrier, another one is the energy source. And then you have information on the production device, but we also have a data field on purpose. So what is the purpose of the certificate? And that clarifies very well what it can be used for. One of the purposes is disclosure. And those certificates that are currently transferred internationally, they're all disclosure certificates. But we have also in national configurations, support certificates, and you can also have target purpose certificates. So that being said, let's dive into some of our members who have experience with operating quantum certificate systems, mainly from electricity, but also from high efficient cogeneration targets. And they come from mainly Italy, Belgium, and Sweden and Norway. And I see that several of the issuing bodies are also attending, some with experience on operating a quantum system. So I can say 5 main things about quota systems. I can say that they work. They do stimulate the cheapest technologies. And from that point, we can say that they show usefulness for an emerging market. On the other hand, we also see that they have allowed for windfall profits for cheap technologies and not always stimulated the most sustainable options. For example, we see also that In Belgium, the quota systems of the three regions, they have been fine-tuned in a way that it essentially has become a feed-in premium system, although it's still a quota obligation system, but with minimum prices tweaked per technology. And also in UK support system, we see similar things with a banding factor. Then I read your proposal to link support and disclosure on a same certificate. We have to be very clear that support and disclosure to an end consumer are two different aspects in itself. It's not wrong to consider mixing them on one certificate, but you have to be very mindful on what you mix here then. So in the quota systems for Sweden and Norway and Belgium, they have been really separate instruments. And if you mix them, you will see that you mix a mandatory system with a voluntary demand system. If you would aim to stimulate consumers to fill the gap between their quotum and their full consumption, in the past, it has often shown to be way too expensive for those consumers to do that with the support certificates. So although many of the systems have intended such thing in the design, they usually didn't succeed in achieving that. But the same certificate structure can indeed convey both purposes, although they have different optimal lifetimes. There has also been a case where in Flanders until 2013, they were both added as separate coupons on one certificate, which could be used separately, disclosure and support. So then I read as third the proposal to consider whether quota should be over the energy carriers or quota per energy carrier. In a mature market, you need different incentive levels than for developing markets. So it seems not so easy to have one overall quotum for all the energy carriers. It should also take into account energy carrier conversion costs. And although possibly a mature market needs lower financial incentive, it also needs the flexibility. So the electricity sector would need the flexibility that the added gas support or the added gas production can deliver. So it needs careful balancing if you consider such aspects. Fourthly, quota across jurisdictions and extended geographical scopes for increased flexibility. Yes, it shows to work in Sweden and Norway, but it doesn't work everywhere. It needs joint design from scratch on, that is for sure, because merging systems after they've launched is as shown to be very difficult. The Belgian issuing bodies have tried with their support systems, and it's not easy, actually not feasible if the design has been slightly different.
Catherine, can I ask you to conclude, please?
Yeah, I can say one more aspect of the quotum systems. There is also a difference between equalizing financial support and equalizing political support, because there is a cost base according to location, not the same for all technologies, and they're putting quota on large consumers also has shown to be putting political pressure from the energy intensive industry to lower the burden on them, even coming to the threats of relocating. So in conclusion, I can say the proposal of the Florence School of Regulation is interesting. It needs deeper study to elaborate the details that the European Energy Certificate System and the Association of Issuing Bodies would be ready to govern it, because the EEC certificate is already able to convey the necessary information for both support and disclosure systems. It can be further tweaked to comprise the details. AIB has an elaborated governance structure that allows quality assurance and several schemes to further develop, but a challenge indeed will be in the funding.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. So we give the floor now to Mr. Rolf Ticht from ERGAR. He also presented at the Madrid Forum like Jeppe, and we look forward to hearing your feedback.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Florence School of Regulation giving us, ERGAR, the opportunity to participate in this important debate on governance of possible enhanced guarantees of origin. And I must say the circumstances are quite specific and special today in many aspects. My name is indeed Rolf Ticht. I'm an elected board member of ERGAR, and in my daily life, managing director of Vertogas of the National Registry of the Netherlands. Currently, ERGAR represents 7 national registries, trading 90% of the certificates of renewable gases through the European gas grid. And it has been more than 4 years now that ERGAR and its 27 members, among them major gas TSOs, DSOs from 50 countries, successfully work on establishing a transparent, harmonized and reliable European-wide tracking system of renewable gases to all application purpose while preventing a double counting, which is quite important. We believe that it is important to remind ourselves that ERGAR's main mission is to enable cross-border transfer of certificates based on existing European legislations. Today, the guarantees of origins is a type of certificate that is a sole function in showing to a final customer that its given its quantity of energy was produced from renewable sources. I think that is quite important to mention as well. Currently, however, this is only for electricity. It will be soon available for renewable gases such as, but not limited to, biomethane and hydrogen, and as well heating and cooling, which is fully in line with the European vision of integrated energy. And this might be further extended in the near future if some circumstances ask for it, such as climate and market, because we know that is quite moving at the moment. As well, the application of the guarantees of origin could change following the release of the energy system integration and hydrogen strategies, which announced the development of robust certification system for renewable and low carbon gases, which in full life cycle greenhouse emissions of production is considered. And with this approach, it's possible that the guarantees of origin will be further enhanced and further developed for target compliance purposes, which we are working on. At national level, however, it's already the case in the Netherlands, where guarantees of origin for renewable gases, including future hydrogen, and counted towards meeting national renewable energy targets. I might come back to that later. It's also possible to use them for full disclosure, so meeting the sustainability requirements. ERGAR at the moment is already working on the development of an holistic guarantee of origin system, with the revision of the CEN EN 16325 norms. And we are ready to contribute in building the governance for an enhanced guarantee of origin system built upon consistent legal framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perfectly on time. Thank you. So
You're welcome.
We can give now the floor to our last speaker, Michele Bernatore.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, FSR, for the invitation to European Energy Retailers. EER is a European association founded by 5 different national associations, which in Sweden, Italy, Spain, Germany, and France represent basically newcomers and non-integrated energy retailers and service providers. And I'm Michele Bernatore. I used to be chairman of EER. Current chairman Antonio Colino asked me to represent the association today. Well, first point, our impression is that in your proposal is clearly a proposal based on microeconomics and on efficiency of sector coupling and transition of it to a low carbon economy as requested by the European objectives. I guess we all are aware here that the reason why we never had an integrated system of subsidies to renewables was that even if the Commission at some point, many in a few times wanted to push for that. The European Council stopped it. Why? Because clearly policy from the policy side, the member states preferred to protect their renewable sectors, their national renewable sectors. Is this an issue? Well, clearly it is, because it's going to be more and more an issue as long as we are going to have more and more renewables, a wider share of renewables in the wholesale electricity market. So that's, in my opinion, a very big point. I do welcome the effort of FSR to bring the reasons of microeconomics and efficiency. Again, I think this is a good idea. We should not be surprised if the same political issue arises again. I hope this won't be the case, at least not as in the past, because as I said, now integrating the renewables is much more important than it used to be 10 years or 15 years ago. So having said that, I'm not sure I am clear about what would mean using the same system for disclosure and for assessing the reaching level of the quotas among the European countries obliged to the transition. I don't know, maybe there might be a difference, a dual surrendering system, or the surrendering action would entail that the same agent is using the same amount of guarantees for both the disclosure and the achievement of the national obligation. I think this should be investigated. Probably you have done it already. I'm not aware of that. I was not there last time. Sorry for this. So I might not have in the bigger picture. But that point of disclosure, the efficiency of the disclosure system, it's something that it's very important for us. Why I'm saying this? Because what we're seeing, if we only look at the way energy retailers do marketing with renewables, of course, they have used or tried to use a lot guarantees of origins as a disclosure mechanism. What we've seen is that more and more frequently, final customers, especially corporate customers, they tend to not be this much reliant on guarantees of origins, because they feel it's like they feel them too theoretical, too virtual, because of course they are virtual, but they represent money. So they in the other sense they are perfectly okay for the objective, which is giving support to anyone is investing on renewables. Anyway, we have to be aware that apparently customers want some kind of physicality. What is this physicality is very difficult to say. And what we've seen is that the work of some retailers to basically invent artificial physicality through complex contracts. So basically you try to tie a production facility with a consumption facility with complex contracts, which of course need to deal with the volatility, with the impossibility of matching exactly in the same time a physical production with a physical consumption. But anyway, this is with a lot of transaction costs and complications feasible, and it looks like this is welcomed by final customers. So I see there is a need of integrating the support of renewables and the measurement of the achievement. And your proposal in my opinion, goes in this direction. There is also a need to revive the disclosure function of GOES. I'm not sure doing the two things with the same tool might also have effects and unexpected effects. But this is here is my ignorance. I don't really know. Thank you.
Many thanks to you, Michele. And thanks to all panelists today, because I think it was very interesting and relevant input what you provided. Alberto and I will definitely take it into account. The reason why we wanted to have this panel debate was exactly to get your feedback on the implementation of guarantees of origin the way it is now. So thank you very much for all your inputs and also your support to the proposal. And maybe Alberto wants to quickly reply to some of the points. You are muted.
No, just maybe just one single point. Because that was being raised by twice, I think, or several times. It's about the dual role of GOES or GOES. I mean, let's say a retailer that has an obligation of, I mean, the obligation could be set different for different sectors, vectors, whatever. So, but let's assume that a retailer is given an obligation of 40%. Well, that it will have to surrender 40% gross with respect to the financial consumption it's responsible for. But at that point, it could claim that 40% of the energy that it sells is renewable within the scheme. So it could, for disclosure purposes, for selling, and if it wants to go to 50% for disclosure purposes because it serves customers who are particularly green-minded, then it can go to 50%. It means that the 40, he would have exceeded his quota, so he would have met his obligation, but with the same renewable quality of the energy is used both for disclosure purposes. It's a bit like the two coupon system, if you want. I mean, the same certificate can serve both purposes, but obviously we will elaborate it in our report. I think now, Ilaria, it's better if we go to the polls, because we also want to have to give an opportunity to the audience to engage with this discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we will now submit some live polls to the audience. So all participants and speakers, if you want, are invited to reply to these polls. And then we will ask our panel to comment on the results. So whenever Chiara is ready, we can start with the first question. Chiara?
Yes, it's up.
Okay, good. Yes, I
can you see
yes,
participants are voting?
Ah, perfect. Thank you very much.
And we are going to share the results in a moment.
Okay, so the first question is basically a general question on the general idea, on the general proposal of FSR. So whether this mechanism based on enhanced guarantees of origin could actually be successful to promote the achievement of the targets as we imagined. Let's see the results. Yes, so the 87% of voters think that yes, it would be a good use, and the instrument as we proposed it could be useful for this purpose. Thank you. Next question, please. So, do you consider that this mechanism could become the basic support and accounting scheme for the achievement of the renewable energy penetration target? Yes, but only if there are also additional technology-specific support measures, as we said, they could be put on top, or no, because a mechanism based on enhanced guarantees of origin can at best supplement the existing supportive schemes, or no idea. Please vote. Okay. Yes, it seems that 58%, so a bit more than the majority, as an idea that yes, the mechanism could work, but also some additional measures would be needed. The rest of the replies are quite, let's say, fragmented, so we have an equal division among the other options. Next question, please. Do you consider the governance of the European energy certificate schemes suitable to support this new, these enhanced guarantees of origin? Yes, we should not change anything. Yes, but it would require a statutory framework such as the one that ENTSO-E and ENTSOG have, or no? Please vote. Okay, yes, the majority thinks that it would be okay, but additionally a statutory framework would be needed to really be effective. Thank you. And I think we have one more. Do you see a problem in guarantees of origin performing a multiple role? As we discussed, as we explained in our proposal, yes, it could be a problem because it might be confusing. No, because the different purposes are clear. And no, because in fact, there are benefits in using a single instrument for different purposes. 45%, no, there is no problem. And in fact, the benefits are evident in using such an instrument for different purposes. Okay, very good.
Yeah, I think we still have one, I guess.
We have the final one, which is, yes, because it is a bit of a repetition. So those of you who followed us in the previous webinar have already answered this, but we want to check again that your views. So it's a general question about how we use guarantees of origin, if across vectors or across jurisdictions, or both across vectors and across jurisdictions. So what is the scope that guarantees of origin as upgraded should have? Should they link different types of vectors, and should they link different member states? Yes, no, please vote. Okay, it seems to be a confirmation from previous results. The majority thinks that it would be probably more effective to have guarantees of origin covering both vectors, different vectors, and different jurisdictions. Thank you very much for your vote, for your opinions. And now we can give the floor to the panel for comments on the results. If there are no volunteers on who wants to start, I will just give the floor to Katrin first. Ladies first, please.
Thank you. I'm not very surprised of most of the poll results. I think indeed a certificate-based system can achieve a lot. In general, it needs a lot of consideration on the detail and their impact, as I've been mentioning. When talking about governance and can EECS facilitate such governance, as I mentioned, indeed, the system in itself works and can govern it. Though indeed, while growing bigger, institutionalizing would not be bad in itself. It would so the current governance structure is consensus-based. If there needs to be detailed harmonization built upon a system that's already implemented, such things are easier to do top-down, and then working from a central authority would ease some type of governance. We come, however, from a distributed or a decentral model, so there needs to be clear regulation of the roles of the different organs in such a new governance system. It's not easy to simply impose something on top of what there is today. So it needs some bit of detail. I don't know if you want a specific comment on a specific.
No, we are happy with your comments. Thank you very much. Mr. Rolf Ticht, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, indeed. I think the main line through the questions and the answers is more or less in the greater lines as we think as well. However, I think you must agree, you must acknowledge that there are differences in the several, let's say, types of guarantees of origin at the moment, due to legislation, but due to the fact that the one is a molecule and the other one is an electron. So that requires some different approaches. And I think it's quite important to accept that for the time being, the expertise is different as well. And that doesn't mean that you will end up in different streams, I believe, but that's my personal feeling, that for the near future or for the later future, I would say you will end up in one general system, which is only energy. So I believe in the future you will just order your energy, your green energy, and whether that's molecules or electrons, that shouldn't make any difference, because that is up to the market how to share or how to deal with it. But for the time being, I think we should really work on the expertise and try to combine as much as possible efforts to come to a very efficient way of working, which joins the future for all of us. Because there is one thing very much important. I just looked to the Attenborough movie yesterday, which was quite impressive. I can really recommend to look to that. And that did realize myself that it is quite important to cooperate and to join efforts to come to one system. But for the time being, I believe you should very carefully work on the different streams and to really understand how it works, where the differences are in Europe, to come finally to one harmonized system. And for me, that is absolutely sure you should come to one harmonized system.
Thank you very much. Michele?
Yes, thank you. I would like just to mention this. Maybe the general concern about the double use of the same tool for disclosure and for tracking the achievement of the country is because in case we expect binding targets for the countries, then there might be shadow prices which are different in every countries between the value of the national achievement, the marginal cost of the national achievement, and the marginal willingness to pay of the final customer for disclosure. So if this happens, this means that we are going to introduce some kind of potential distortion. So I think this is basically the point. I'm clearly, if no national binding targets will arise, I think things are, from this point of view, the double use of the same tool are going to be much easier. I'm just guessing for the moment. Thank you.
Many thanks to you, Michele, and Jeppe, your comments.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, it seems that the audience attending this webinar, GEOs, share many of the views that we have, that the GEOs could have another role, and another enhanced role in the future. So I think there we are very much in line with the feedback from the audience. I have a few comments. Again, I think want to reiterate that, of course, this would require that the scope and function of the GEO would need to be amended. So the RED basically need to be amended for such a system to develop in the future. And I think one of the issues that has been difficult in terms of cross jurisdiction in terms of renewable gases has been the methodology of target counting for member states, so that even no matter if renewable gases were subsidized or not, they were always considered or counted as being used in the country where they were produced and not where they were sold to. So there are different amendments that needs to take place for such a system to happen now, but I think we're all clear on that. I have one comment more on the last questions about across vectors and across jurisdiction. I think we, in the prime mover discussion, at an early stage, agreed that it was important that for geos that across vectors there should be really a physical conversion, that we were not we were agreeing on a system where it is not just papers that are being traded. So basically the principle that an electricity guarantee of origin was issued based on electricity production and cancelled based on electricity use, and a gas guarantee of origin were issued based on a gas production and cancelled based on a gas use. And I think that principle, as I understand the discussion and development of the SIM standard, but I might be wrong. But anyway, that principle was important for some of the recommendations that we put to the Madrid Forum, that we're not just talking about papers changing hands here. We're talking about a system for a geo system, and a principle that a physical conversion between vectors has to take place somehow. I think I don't have more to add now. Thank you.
Many thanks to all of you, very useful. We will not comment now because I guess Alberto will also say something in the conclusions on the different points that were raised. We have now more than 15 minutes, approximately 18 minutes for the Q&As. Some have started arriving through the box, so I will start with the first one from Francisco de la Flor. In times of system integration, while keeping the market integration and strongly avoiding potential market fragmentation, shouldn't we try to get a single functioning guarantees of origin mechanism for all energies, attributing the appropriate label color based on full life cycle assessment, footprint and economics? So in fact, it's strengthening the proposal, but adding up to the full life cycle assessment element. Do our panelists agree on this?
Can
Michele?
I comment on that?
Sure.
It's Michele, very briefly. Well, my impression is that when it comes to an holistic view of the let's call it, I don't know, the carbon footprint, for example, if you want to have a life cycle assessment, basically you are enlarging the scope as much that in the end you fail. So basically, I think that we should concern on energy when it comes to energy in order not to basically fail. Think of electric cars. Okay, so when you say, okay, we should consider the externalities of a combustion fueled car versus the ones of an electric car, you can base this on local emissions of the car, or you can say we should do a life cycle assessment of the building process of the cars. So batteries, cars, costs of recycling them when their life is finished. You can do that, but basically, if you do that, you are withdrawing from the duty of assessing the environmental impact of the energy use of the car. Okay, so yeah, it would be nice, a world where you can consider everything, but I think that an efficient way of doing this is that each sector tries to track their direct impact. And I guess the same can be done also for recycling, for manufacturing. But we should be concerned about the energy use, I guess. And the energy use of a car is the direct energy use of the car. I don't know if this makes sense.
Very clear. Thanks a lot, Michele. Catherine.
Yes, I can support what's being said. I think I want to first comment on the word single functioning geo mechanism. I think that is definitely true. It needs a single geosystem for all energy carriers, because that facilitates conveying the information on the energy source. And it also facilitates to convey the reliability across energy carrier conversion, because sector integration is about energy carrier conversion. So that's why I think there needs to be a generic geosystem for all energy carriers. And well, if they need further details per energy carrier, that can be done as well. That's the way that EECS has designed the schemes per energy carrier. And that's also the way it's being structured in the developments for the EN 16325 in CEN as they are ongoing. Apart from that, indeed, the LCA question, we've heard often a request to inform on carbon footprint on the geo. I think AIB can also say that they are in favor of doing it in general and has been trying to establish it. So in the current legislative framework, it's not easy to do so because there are different potential methodologies, and agreeing on a harmonized methodology over Europe needs a top-down approach that installs a harmonized method for calculating carbon footprint. Otherwise, you have different measures everywhere and the information has no value at all.
Thank you, Catherine. Very good points. So about this life cycle assessment, it seems everybody agrees on this, but then, as we know, it's very difficult then to really keep track in a clear manner.
I have a comment on the issue about schemes. I think what is important is that we have a common standard. I think that is really what is important. That is that there's a common standard that everybody can use in terms of which scheme we are going to use or which scheme we're not going to use. We will have to see on that. It might be that in the area of hydrogen, that there is a certain, you could say, expertise, or there's a certain structure in countries where you want to implement the standard and the obligation in the directive, which would need another scheme than ERGA or another scheme than EECS. So I think what is important is that we have a common standard here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I fully much agree on that.
Okay, very good. So let's go to the next question, which is about, let's say, connectivity, because we know that green hydrogen can be produced from renewable energy. And the question is about how could the concept of additionality be used to improve the scheme, considering that in fact, it's very different when you produce hydrogen from from a direct connection with renewable power generation. We think, of course, of offshore wind, onshore wind, or other sources of solar. And when instead it is produced starting from power from the grid, which we know includes a mix of different types of electricity. So how could the scheme be improved, taking this into account, and therefore becoming more attractive to market participants? Maybe first Alberto wants to, because it's very specific on the proposal. So with some more explanation. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And Ilaria, we'll try to be brief, but also link to something that has already been discussed beforehand. Indeed, there are two ways. If we look at hydrogen, the production of green hydrogen, there are two ways of achieving this. One is the physical connection. That's has two, in our view, some drawbacks, because obviously limit the use of the electrolyzer to the production of wind farms, for example, and obviously this would limit the degree of usage of the conversion facility. So the alternative would be to say that an electrolyzer connected to the main grid would be able to claim that the hydrogen produced by it is green or is renewable if it surrender for cancellation an equivalent amount of gross to the energy, to the electricity that it uses for the production of hydrogen. So not a quota as for final energy consumption, but the full consumption of electricity of the electrolyzers would have to be covered by gross. This gross would be cancelled, and in return, the electrolyzer will be issued gross on hydrogen. And in that way, the energy chain will continue. So this is one way of cross-border implementation of our mechanism through transformation. And as long as you can prove by the mechanism that the input energy is renewable, then the output of energy will also be considered renewables and therefore be issued with gross. That is answering to the specific questions. I link also to the cross-vector nature. Indeed, and the cross-jurisdictional nature. Indeed, the Commission tried in, I think it was 2000, the first directive, 2009, to introduce certificate of origins, a scheme across jurisdictions. Didn't get it. So clearly, it's far from obvious that this time it will be accepted, although the costs now are much higher for achieving the target, and therefore the balance between the national objectives and the overall target might be slightly different. And a cross-vector, as I mentioned beforehand, there's already flexibility instrument. Statistical transfer are quotas of renewables. They're not necessarily specific to one vector. So there is already some flexibility in using energy produced in different countries, maybe of different type, renewable energy produced in different countries, different type, to meet the obligation of another member state. So this one would be generalizing that flexibility, but it's far from obvious. And the scheme is flexible enough to be segmented as much as you want. Obviously, the more you segment it, the less you benefit from the least cost solution.
Absolutely, thank you. From the chat box, I can only take two more questions, but more as a recommendation from Tom Lindberg. First, to maybe hurry up as I read it, because corporates demand for guarantees of origins as documentation for all their renewable purchase and consumption very fast across Europe. So this is a trend which is growing very fast. And also a suggestion to look at the US case. Apparently there, renewable energy certificates are being used as both target compliance tool and for voluntary purposes. That's not the case here. So of course, that's where an upgrade will be needed. Okay, so I think we have now a few minutes for concluding remarks. If there are no more questions or no comments from our panelists, I will give the floor to Alberto. Any comments? Any final remark?
Yeah,
Catherine? Yes.
Quickly add on the additionality question that there are several countries where there are issuance of GOs is only to the producers in case there is no support received by the producers, and otherwise the GOs are being put on the account of the issuing body or another party who organizes the auction, and then an auction is being organized, and the revenues of the auction are being used for the support system as well. So that happens in quite a lot of countries. So that could be one element.
Okay.
Further, I also want to emphasize, because it may not have been that impression today, but there are very good dialogues ongoing between AIB and ERCAR. We are cooperating in 3 projects these days in a very constructive way, and building structures together for further development. So please don't take any signal competition on that field.
Sure.
Maybe, if I might.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I have just one general remark, which is complicated, let's say, the way we move forward. And that has to do with the national authorities, the national way of counting all climate goals. And the problem there is, as we experience, for example, in the Netherlands, that everything is, let's say, related to here and today, instead of taking your timeline to the future and look backwards what you need to change before you come to your goals in the future. And if you are not able and you are not creative in a way that is required, then it might be quite a hurdle to overcome the step towards the future. So I would really very much, let's say, appreciate if we could base our visions a bit more towards the future and see what is backwards, let's say, appreciated to change.
Thanks. Very good recommendation. Let's look back before looking forward. Very good. We take it like that. Alberto, your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Larry. Well, what can I say? This is not the first time that we submit our proposal to participants in our debates. In fact, this is the second time with an open debate, and then we had a previous event with a more restricted audience, and every time we seem to receive quite overwhelming support. So I take this to mean that we should further elaborate on our scheme. Maybe I can add consideration on a couple of more aspects. One is the life cycle carbon footprint. That's a chapter of its own. We only included in our proposal because we believe that the same certificate, the same guarantees could serve more purposes. We will elaborate this more in depth in our report. I do not see the problem of using the same record for different purposes. Obviously, you have to be careful not to double count it, but different purposes can be served by the same record. But this is not the scope, the focus of our work. We just added for completeness, just to say the same certificate, the same guarantee of origin could use, guarantee of renewable origin can be used for additional purposes. Then additionality. I think my known typo of saying that the way we see it is guarantees of renewable origin supplementing other schemes. Clearly, for the schemes which are already there and for which there are already rights acquired by renewable producers, then I do agree that there would have to be ways in which these schemes would have to accommodate the new guarantees of origin, and maybe the scheme would have to be revised and the total support guaranteed by a combination of the new scheme of guarantee of renewable origins and a top-up support. But for going forward, and this is actually very much a going forward proposal, because we believe that now we have a greater challenge with more ambitious targets and therefore more expensive targets. Going forward, the mechanism that we propose will provide a standard basic support for all renewables, and then it will be up to the policymakers, the member states, the regulators to decide whether, for example, infant technologies or technologies which are at a critical stage might need additional support on a temporary basis. In the longer term, I don't really see why we should be dogmatic on how we achieve the renewable penetration target. If one vector is going to be always more expensive to green, not more expensive as such, but more expensive to green, why should we insist in greening that vector? As I said, it's not a matter of not supporting infant technologies, but once all technologies are mature, or once a technology is mature and it is still more expensive to green than other ones, then I think a reflection should be made of why there may be security of supply reasons, there may be many reasons, but a reflection should be made. So in conclusion, because we're running out of time, I think we'll, what the feedback we got from the polls and also from our panelists, whom I would like to thank very much for their contribution, is that we should continue to work on this, working out the details, and then try to make it a proposal which could be discussed among policymakers.
Great, thank you very much, Alberto. So as we are now, time is up, so we can only conclude with a big thank you to all the participants and to all our speakers in the panel, Michele Bernatore, Katrin Verfimp, Jeppe Björk, and Mr. Rolf Ticht. And Alberto, thank you very much for your participation. We will keep in touch.